Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're going to crack open this religious study guide that takes a fresh look at one of the oldest stories in the book, literally Cain and Abel.
Oh, yeah.
You might think, oh, that one. Haven't we heard it all before? But trust me, there's some seriously thought-provoking stuff in here about faith and envy and the choices we make even today.
It's amazing how these ancient stories still resonate, you know. We're going to uncover some surprising insights about this tale that you may have never thought of before.
Okay, so for anyone who needs a refresher, we're talking about Adam and Eve's first two sons, Cain and Abel.
Yeah.
And right off the bat, something struck me as really interesting about Eve's reaction to Cain's birth. She says, "With the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man."
I noticed that too.
Yeah.
It's like she's already projecting huge expectations onto him.
No.
You know, remember, God had promised that one of her descendants would defeat evil, right? So it's easy to imagine Eve hoping, maybe even believing that Cain was that chosen one.
That makes his downfall even more tragic, doesn't it? It makes you wonder why. What makes siblings raised in the same family turn out so differently? It's like that in the story, and it's like that in real life, too.
Right. The source material dives into the nature versus nurture debate, which is a huge question for all of us.
Yeah.
But it also points to the moral ways of life that Cain and Abel choose. Like from the very beginning, they're on different paths.
The study guide spends some time looking at the offerings that Cain and Abel brought to God. I always thought the big deal was that Cain offered fruit instead of an animal sacrifice, like it was the wrong kind of gift.
Yeah, that's a common misunderstanding. But this source makes it clear both types of offerings were acceptable to God. The key difference wasn't what they offered, but the attitude behind it.
So what was so different about their attitudes? I'm intrigued.
Well, Abel offered the firstborn and the best of his flock. That shows a real desire to honor God, to give him the most valuable thing. It was an act of genuine faith.
But with Cain, it sounds like he just went through the motions.
Exactly. He just brought some generic produce, maybe even leftovers, after taking what he needed first. It seems more like an obligation than a heartfelt act of worship.
So it's not about checking boxes or following rules blindly. It's about the genuine intention behind our actions. That's a pretty powerful message for today, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of something I read recently about the neuroscience of giving. Apparently, when we give with a genuine spirit of generosity, it actually activates reward centers in our brains, leading to feelings of happiness and well-being.
Oh.
So maybe Abel wasn't just being pious, he was actually onto something.
Okay, I like that. So God sees Abel's offering and is pleased, but with Cain's, not so much. And this is where Cain's anger starts to bubble over.
And that anger is really at the heart of the story. This source points out a fascinating parallel to Adam and Eve's reaction when they disobeyed God. They repented, admitted their wrongdoing. But Cain, he goes in the opposite direction. Anger, blame, resentment, those are his responses. It's like he's doubling down on his pride.
And this is when God gives Cain that famous warning about sin crouching at the door. That image always gave me chills. It's so vivid.
It is, isn't it? It speaks to something primal within us, this idea of temptation as a predator lurking, ready to pounce. It's fascinating how the source material uses this literary device to convey such a profound message. The point isn't to scare us, but to make us aware of the very real dangers of giving in to negative emotions. It's like a cautionary tale for all time.
Then, of course, comes the most infamous part of the story, the murder of Abel. What struck me is that the source we're looking at actually leaves out what Cain said to his brother before he killed him. It just says that Cain talked to Abel and then...
It's a brilliant omission. It leaves us hanging, wondering what those final words could have been, what rage or resentment might have boiled over.
It's almost like a psychological thriller, leaving us to fill in the blanks with our own imaginations. But even without knowing exactly what was said, I think it forces us to confront the power of unspoken emotions. The envy, the resentment, the bitterness those feelings can simmer beneath the surface and lead to terrible consequences.
It's like the source material saying that the truly destructive forces are often the ones we keep hidden even from ourselves. What do you think, does that resonate with you?
It absolutely does. It makes me think about all the times let's just say I haven't always handled my own jealousy or frustration in the healthiest ways. And I'm sure our listeners can relate to that too.
I think we all can. And that's the genius of this story. It speaks to the darkest parts of human nature, the impulses that drive us to act in ways we later regret. But it also offers a glimmer of hope because by recognizing these patterns, we can start to make different choices.
And then, of course, there are the consequences. Cain tries to play it cool, even asks God, "Am I my brother's keeper?" But there's no escaping what he's done.
What's interesting is how Cain's attempt to dodge responsibility mirrors Adam's in the Garden of Eden. It's this classic human instinct to deflect blame when we mess up. But the source makes it clear we are our brother's keepers, whether we acknowledge it or not.
And the punishment God gives Cain, it's almost poetic, isn't it? Cain, the farmer, is cursed from the ground itself.
It's such a powerful symbol, right? The very thing that sustained him is now the source of his suffering. It speaks to this interconnectedness between humanity and nature, how our actions have ripple effects we might not even realize.
This is where the source goes beyond the familiar story and starts to draw these really interesting contrasts between Cain and Abel, almost like they represent two paths we can choose from in our own lives.
Exactly. It lays out this framework. Cain becomes the archetype for independence from God, for defiance, selfishness leading to actions that harm others. Abel, on the other hand, embodies dependence on God, faith, and righteous deeds.
So it's not just an ancient story, it's a mirror reflecting back at us, asking, which path are you on? That's pretty heavy stuff. And honestly, it makes me wonder, is it really that black and white? Are we all just destined to be either Cain or Abel?
That's a great question, and I don't think the source is suggesting it's quite that simple. What's fascinating is that it doesn't demonize Cain entirely. He's not pure evil. He's a complex figure who makes terrible choices. And that's something we can all relate to, right? We have those moments where we let anger or envy get the best of us. The key is, what do we do after those moments? Do we double down on our mistakes like Cain, or do we strive to make amends?
There's this other detail that always stuck with me, God saying that Abel's blood is crying out from the ground. It's such a haunting image.
It is, and it raises an important question. If Abel's blood shed through violence and injustice could cry out, what do our actions say? What echoes do they leave behind, even without words?
It's like that saying, what you do speaks so loudly I can't hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
This story takes it to another level. Our actions have consequences beyond what we can even imagine. They ripple out, affecting others, affecting the world around us.
And it's not just about the big dramatic actions. It's about the everyday choices we make, how we treat the people around us, how we respond to challenges, whether we use our talents to build up or to tear down.
It's making me think about the concept of karma, how our actions create a kind of energy that comes back to us, not necessarily in some supernatural way, but just in the natural flow of cause and effect. Like if you're constantly putting negativity out into the world, chances are you're going to attract more negativity back.
I love that connection. And it makes me think about how we often talk about being the change we want to see in the world. This story suggests that it starts with those seemingly small choices, those everyday acts of kindness or cruelty. They might not seem like much in the moment, but they contribute to the overall energy we're putting out into the world.
You know, it's interesting that this story happens so early in the Bible, right after the whole Garden of Eden thing. It's like from the very beginning of humanity, we're already wrestling with these fundamental questions about good and evil, about making choices that have consequences.
It's almost like a blueprint for the ongoing human drama, isn't it?
Right.
The constant struggle between our better angels and our darker impulses. And it plays out on a personal level within each of us, but also on a societal level. Look at all the conflict and violence in the world today. It's like Cain and Abel on a massive scale.
That's a pretty sobering thought, but it also makes me think that maybe this story can offer some guidance for navigating those complexities. It reminds us to be mindful of the seeds we're planting, to treat our actions carefully, to recognize the power we have to shape the world around us.
And it's not about being perfect, because let's face it, none of us are. We're all capable of making Cain-like choices sometimes. The important thing is to acknowledge our mistakes, to learn from them, and to strive to do better, to feed that Abel wolf within us.
I love that. Feed the Abel wolf. That's something I'm going to take away from this for sure. It's a reminder that we have a choice in every moment about which part of ourselves we're going to nurture.
It makes me think about how much energy we often waste on things that don't really matter. Gossip, comparison, trying to keep up with the Joneses. What if we redirected all that energy towards cultivating kindness, generosity, and compassion? What kind of world could we create?
That's a powerful question to ponder. And it makes me think about how this story isn't just about avoiding evil. It's about actively choosing good. It's about consciously cultivating those Abel-like qualities that make us more fully human, more connected to something larger than ourselves.
I think that's a great point. It's not enough to simply not do bad things. We're called to something more, to actively contribute to the good, to be a force for positive change in the world.
It's crazy how much we can pull out of just this one little story. It's like a whole library of human experience in just these few verses.
I know, right? And one of the things that really sticks out to me is how this story is like the foundation for understanding, like these primal relationships, especially between siblings. Cain and Abel, the first brothers. Their story kind of sets the stage for like all the complicated stuff that comes with being a brother or a sister that we still see today.
The love, the rivalry, the fighting, it's all right there. And it almost feels like sometimes those relationships, the ones with our siblings, they bring out like the best and the worst in us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What I think is super interesting, though, is that even though Cain and Abel grew up in the same family, they were like total opposites. Different personalities, different values, different ways of seeing the world. And I think that's something we all see in our own families, too.
It's like they say, you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family. And sometimes those differences in families, it can cause some real tension, even resentment.
It's true. But I also think this story is kind of a challenge to us, a challenge to try and understand those differences, to respect the choices our siblings make even when we don't agree with them.
It's about recognizing that like they're on their own journey. They have their own path, their own lessons to learn. And maybe if we try to see things from their point of view, we might learn something ourselves.
Yeah, like instead of always getting hung up on who's right and who's wrong, we can focus on trying to understand each other because those family bonds, they're precious,
Yeah.
you know, and they're worth fighting for.
Something else I thought was interesting in the study guide was how it talked about the ways this story has been interpreted like throughout history, and not always for good. It's been used to justify violence, to demonize certain groups, to prop up systems of oppression.
Right. That's one of the tricky things about interpreting these old sacred texts, isn't it? It's
Hmm.
so easy to twist the meaning to fit our own agenda to confirm what we already believe.
It reminds us that we can't just take these stories at face value. We have to approach them with a critical eye, with humility, and be willing to question what we think we know.
And remember, context. We can't just take these stories out of their time and place and try to apply them to today. We have to think about the time period, the social norms, who they were talking to. It's like trying to get a joke from a different culture. You need to know the background to get it.
That's a great analogy. So, as we kind of wrap up our deep dive on Cain and Abel, I'm curious, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from this?
Hmm. I think for me, it's the reminder that even though this is like a super old story, it's about something that's still relevant today for all of us. It's about the struggle between good and evil, the consequences of our choices, the potential for darkness, but also for redemption. And ultimately, I hope it gets people thinking about their own lives, their own choices, and asking themselves, what path am I on? Am I feeding the Cain wolf or the Abel wolf inside me?
And to remember that it's never too late to change course, to choose love over hate, forgiveness over resentment, hope over despair.
Well said. I think that about wraps it up. Thanks for joining us, everyone.